Okay. So, starting the audio, three, two, and one. Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people where we speak about critical issues in the blindness community from all over the world and across the universe. Tonight, this morning, this afternoon, whenever you watch this, Tylia Flores, welcome to the show. You're the next guest. As I've come to understand, you are a friend, I believe, of Aaron, from who we interviewed just a few days back. And you're basically someone from the public who came up to me and said, "Hey, can I be on your show?" And I looked into your background, your story of all the important work that you do for cerebral palsy and many different things. You're doing an incredible job. You probably know what I'm going to ask, and you probably know how we're going to kick it off. Who is Tylia Flores? Your hour starts now. I'll interject when I need to.
Well, my name's Tylia Flores. I'm a 28-year-old disability activist, multiple-time published author, and radio show host personality. I host a show called the Stomping on CP radio show on Asheville FM. And as of in the next few weeks, I will be hosting a show called Ty's Country Rewind on Johnny Rock and Roll Radio out in Houston, Texas. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I was born with cerebral palsy and now I'm living. So
Sounds good. Sounds good. Sounds great. Sounds great. So we're going to really dive deep and totally geek out about the radio stuff, Tylia, because I love talking about internet radio, and just the amount of creativity that I see in that space is really stellar these days. But, we really have to unfold some things that you said already. You say you're a disability activist. You say you're a multiple-time published author. You've done a lot of stuff for disability activism and advocacy. So what exactly do those things mean to you to be an advocate, and exactly what have you done? Really unfold all the ingredients. Go ahead.
well, it means for me to be an activist, it means to me to be the voice for the next generation of those with disabilities. It's not just about advocating for human rights for myself, but it means for the next generation, because the next generation is going to be the ones that go through the same challenges and obstacles that I went through as a kid, not having the proper representation within writing and radio. So that's what it means to me to be a voice, a leader, definitely not a follower, and to be someone that always goes above and beyond to make sure that my society is okay for the older people, the newer people, and the people in the middle.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And I am very concerned about the way people in the United States are being treated, especially people with disabilities. I think this is a huge issue. So now you are sighted, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm very sighted. I have glasses, but I could see perfectly.
Okay.
When it comes to fighting for disability rights, I have 20/20 vision. Yeah,
I just love that. That's so cute.
I have
That's so sweet.
20/20 vision, and when people see me with the green glasses in the board meetings, they're like, "Oh, Miss Flores is gonna talk tonight. Everybody be prepared because I'm coming for you."
That's adorable. Okay, what about stand-up comedy? When are we going to see you on the you could do stand-up. You really could.
I mean, I've considered it, but I'm nowhere near as good as Josh Blue, that has taught me the lucky shoe technique when I go to the airport. My lucky shoes, and I don't get to take off my shoes. I go through TSA peacefully.
I know exactly who you're talking about. Is that the person? I remember watching that as a blind person, watching that person on America's Got Talent, and I was literally, I'm not exaggerating, I really was falling off my chair. I really was laughing so hard. Was that the guy that told the joke about the piles? How every disability has a pile? Was that guy?
No, that's actually the voice box comedian guy. I like both of them, but Josh Blue is a comedian with mild cerebral palsy, and he's just freaking funny.
Yeah. Yeah, I still know who you're talking. Yeah. But that is so funny and so endearing. When I heard your name, Tylia Flores, it sounds like a character from a book. It sounds like some sort of
Oh, thank you.
it sounds like a character in a book. It sounds like some sort of like Dean Koontz or Stephen King character from like a far off galaxy. That's what that name reminds me of, some character in a book. So
Oh my
so yeah,
gosh.
so back to the advocacy stuff, what are some specific changes that you have made or you would like to make, or what are
Oh,
some specific things you've done to help people around the country, specifically speaking?
first of all, I'm the vice president of Living on Cerebral Palsy, so I help people with living issues, helping parents get the resources for their children to go to school, helping adults get services for those
Mm-hmm.
with disabilities. Because let me tell you something, the adult system is very broken. And right now, I was in a situation where a lady was 60 years old. They stopped her healthcare services, and I was able to advocate for her. That way, she could still get the healthcare. I've also
Mm-hmm.
I've also helped a parent enroll their kid into school after the school rejected the child and said that he needed a pre-IEP meeting evaluation after he was approved to go to school, which is against the law, and it takes away from the 504 of 19 of
Mm-hmm.
19 oh dang it, I'm getting tongue-tied, of 1973, which is 50 years ago.
Right.
But I mostly advocate for the adults and the healthcare, because when it comes to cerebral palsy, the adults are overlooked. They're overshadowed. And I am sick and tired of it. The healthcare is
Mm-hmm.
bad, the system's bad, the jobs are bad that they give us, the employment. It's just everything is so bad. So I try to help people go through A, Y, and Z. And I try to encourage people to use their hobbies as their hustle to make money
Mm-hmm.
in their passions versus getting a job at like a convenience store or a Walmart, because anybody could do that. And that's what's expected of somebody with a disability, to go work at Walmart because they have a disability. That's what society sees as the stigma. Oh, they have a disability, so of course they have to work at Walmart or Publix, when you really don't. Like
Right.
when I remember being in high school, and
Mm-hmm.
they would send me on job sites, and they would send me to like Sam's Club, Publix, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. Like, I was in public school all the way until ninth grade because the public school system is broken.
Absolutely.
I like my middle school teachers were fantastic. Miss Van Horn, Dr. Bonko, shout out to them. But when I got to high school, it got bad because immediately they saw me in the wheelchair and they wanted
Mm-hmm.
to put me on a special diploma. When I,
Why?
when I was more than capable of doing the same work as the regular kids,
Yeah.
but I just needed a modification. And that's another thing I
Mm-hmm.
advocate for: proper education within mainstream for students with disabilities, because not everybody with the disability needs to be in special ed.
Exactly. Well, what students deserve, as you know, you've heard this before, you know exactly what this means, is that all students deserve to be educated in their least restrictive environment. So whatever that means to that student, that's what the student needs, whatever their
E-
least restrictive environment is. Right.
Exactly. And when it came
Mm-hmm.
to my education, I started in UCP in New York, great grade school. Then I went to PS1 in New York. And then when I moved to Florida, I went to Amelia Earhart Elementary, where I was placed in ESE. And by the time I went to Sterling Elementary School, they placed me in ESE again for second grade. But then my teacher, Miss Judy Lundy, may she rest in peace because she's no longer living, she said, wait, Tylia can do mainstream work. She's the only student in the class that could read and write and talk and do math. So when I went to the third grade, they put me in mainstream classes. I excelled. I got straight A's. I even won the flat Stanley contest. Fast forward to the next year, they held me back. You know why? Because the day of the standardized test, the FCAT, the Florida Comprehension Reading Assessment Test, I caught anxiety and I bombed it. So it wasn't because I wasn't smart that I got held back. It was because of the state and Jed Bush and what his proper way of saying this is what education is, and we need to judge kids based on a standardized test. And kids do not deserve to be judged based on a standardized test. And that's what I advocate for.
Excellent.
For all students, it's not just people with disabilities. Because
Absolutely.
Each student has a different ability and each student learns differently. So when I go into schools and I meet a parent and I see a parent concerned about what their child's learning and why they're failing, I'm thinking, wait a minute, why don't we think of a different strategy? I'm also an English tutor on the side. So basically, I'm like, wait a minute, Miss So-and-so, he's not doing good in this subject, but when I explain it to him, he gets it. So it's all about learning your child and students' techniques on how they learn. It doesn't mean you fail as a teacher. The only way you fail as a teacher is if you don't get to know the student.
Yeah, you are so right. We need a lot more people like you. The other problem is we don't have enough people that are as articulate, quite frankly, and are as able to advocate so eloquently as you do. You know, your advocacy style is so clear to me and so easy to listen to and easy for me to understand. You know, a little bit about my background. I have glaucoma and a congenital heart defect, and long time ago, about 22 years ago. I'll have to send you the articles about it, but my parents also had to stand up for me in the school system in some county in Maryland where I used to live. Don't worry, 2 articles with 1 story. But in the end of it all, I ended up getting a fabulous TVI, who has now since retired, still alive. She's somewhere in the Carolinas, I guess. But anyway, you are so right. And the public seems to be, every year, I notice that there's more and more discrimination towards people with disabilities. Now, either it's because each year I get older and I notice it more, or each year I notice it more and there is more discrimination to notice. Yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Aaron.
Please do.
I'm just excited when I get into this.
Sure. Go for it. No, I'm totally excited for it too. It's a great, you have great energy. Yeah.
I just feel like there's more and more discrimination. And the thing is more and more people are talking about it now because we have social media, we have TikTok, we have Facebook, we have YouTube to expose these teacher Karens and expose these ableist people that don't really want to give a damn about us. Like a few years ago, back in 2012, like this was right at the start of my advocacy, I connected with a father by the name of Stuart Chiefins, who his son was humiliated and bullied by his school teachers. And you want to know how Mr. Stuart Chiefins found out? He sent his son to school, Akian, an 8-year-old with autism, with the tape recorder. As soon as that video went viral, I wrote him and told him, thank you for your advocacy work, sir. Thank you for being my voice. Because a year before, I had went through that at my public high school, and my mom had to be my voice too. And turns out the teachers didn't get fired, and they're still working at that school.
Why am I not surprised by that fact?
So, and the same thing happened to Stuart Chiefins, and guess what? Him and I are the best of friends. I wrote him a letter to get into law school, and he shares my books.
Oh, so that's so encouraging. That's so sweet. That's wonderful. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I have to thank him for giving me the drive to start advocating, because I was not going to advocate for CP. In fact, the first book I published at 16 years old had nothing to do with CP.
Right.
It had a character in it that had CP, but it had nothing to do with it. But fast forward, when I was 18, I founded Stomping on CP, and I started writing articles for various sites because I was tired of the misconceptions. I was tired of the way society saw me. Oh, she has cerebral palsy. She can't do this. She can't do that. It's a label they put on you from the day you walk into the system, the day you go to school, the day you apply for a job. And I was tired, and I'm like, why not use my passion for writing to advocate and be a journalist and speak the truth? Like, I speak about topics that people are like, oh my God, you spoke about this topic, like sex and disability and periods and disability and being a woman with a disability, because nobody wants to talk about it. They don't want to talk about the taboo things. They don't want to talk about the mental health care system and how broken it is and how somebody with cerebral palsy could be suicidal. But guess what? I'm here to talk about it for you because I've been in the same boat.
Precisely. That is so excellent. Mm-hmm.
At the age of 23, I felt trapped in my body, and I went and got help. And I discovered that I had anxiety, depression, ADHD, and guess what? I take Adderall every day, and I'm not ashamed to say it. It's a part of my life, and I'm going to write about that experience. Take it or leave it. That's what I say with all my books.
Wonderful. So let's dive in head first, some of your books. So what books have you already published? And talk to me about the publication process, by the way. It's very interesting.
A lot of books. Like my next book that's coming out, it's called A Comprehension Guide to Championing Disability Rights, and that is available on Amazon, and it comes out January 1st. And this book is a little bit different because I go into how to be an activist, and I go into the history, and I really dived in deep, and it took days and days of research.
So what is the history behind activism? And what is the history behind disability advocacy, if you've done a lot of research about that?
Well, it starts off with the Institute of the Blind, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The Institute of the Blind in 1973, started this movement for disability rights, and it went into activism. But if you go all the way back prior to the Disability Rights Acts taking effect in all the movements, we had activists out there. The Civil Rights Movement, the Black Panther, and several others. And did you know the main person that led the Black Panther, Rhett Leonard, was actually disabled too?
Didn't specifically know, but I didn't study the history specifically, but it's also not surprising. Yeah, there's a lot of surprises in history.
Did you know that Harriet Tubman suffered from a brain injury?
Didn't know.
And did you know that Emmett Till had a learning disability? Even though he wasn't an activist, he was sadly murdered because of a lie. But see, these are the things that we have to look back on, that these public figures that advocated for one thing also had disabilities too. And that's one thing I want to touch base on, is that in schools, they don't teach you about disability rights history.
No, they don't.
They'll teach you about civil rights and Martin Luther King, but they won't sit there and talk to you about the 504 plan, the bus sitting where a bunch of disabled activists took over New York. So when it falls into activism, the meaning of activism goes way back. And then when we go into disability, activism, it just kept us moving forward.
Wow. So what can you tell me about the time that disability activists took over New York City, as you say?
So like people like Judy Heumann, Jim Breck, and several great others decided they had enough of the buses not being handicap accessible. So you want to know what they did in the middle of Manhattan in New York City?
What did they do?
They sat in front of the buses and they wouldn't let them move for 24 hours.
And what year was this?
I think it was it had to be in the 70s. I'm not so sure. I have to go back and check. There's so many years. But yeah, and after
right. So then how was that resolved? Because now public transportation is accessible. So how was that matter resolved?
the Capitol sitting. If you I'm just gonna tell people how it is. If you watch the movie Crip Camp, you get a whole course history.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It was just a bunch of people going to summer camp.
Mm-hmm.
They did not plan to advocate. It just so happens that they came together and they advocated.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So it takes just you and a bunch of people to say enough's enough.
Exactly.
And that's what I've done since the age of 18 years old,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I've connected with so many great people along the way that I hope to meet one day, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. I mean, the Disability Rights Act signed by George H.W. Bush was just the beginning of a stepping stone. But here's the downfall. They haven't updated it since 2002.
Mm-hmm. And it's a huge problem because
go ahead, Aaron. Definitely, because the world's evolving, it's changing.
yeah.
So you mean to tell me that we have a law that hasn't been updated since 2002? We have the 504 plan, which celebrated its 50th anniversary, the Habilitations Act of 1973, and that is still in the process of being updated. And when I went to that Zoom meeting for Senate and I was hearing about all the problems that are still happening, and they're all like, but it's the 50th anniversary. I'm like, this isn't a time for celebration. This is a time for mourning and working and really encouraging advocates to go out there and try to fix the problem and speak to their senators and speak to their politicians and speak to their governors and even try to speak to the president. Do everything you can for your state and for the other states, because this is just not a one state issue. I just don't want to fix my state of Florida as an activist. I want to fix the whole United States, because I feel like although we have the ADA in place and the 504 plan in place, it's like, so what? We're still dealing with the problems that we were dealing with 60 years ago. People with disabilities are still being institutionalized because their caregivers can't afford to take care of them or they don't have the resources. Like, I had to work with a lady that was 70 years old. She just got custody of her grandson, and it was a sad situation because she's never dealt with cerebral palsy. She was distant from her daughter. CPS gives the grandmother custody, and she's like, well, I don't have the resources to take care of him. What do I do? Of course, they put him in an institution.
Really?
And that is just the saddest thing ever. There's not enough resources to help people, to help adults with disabilities live on their own. There's not enough.
Yeah, and it's absolutely concerning. It really is.
And the sad thing is the government sends over these caseworkers and these social workers that they don't want to help you. They just see your name on a piece of paper and a paycheck. Coordinators that work for these programs, they don't want to help you. They come by your house, once a year? See your name on a paycheck, sign some paperwork, bye, I get paid. No, that's what it shouldn't be about. You should want to help people with disabilities succeed above the stigma, above the bubbles. Like, do you know that if you're somebody with a disability after high school, they allow you to stay in high school until you're 22 years old? Well, and they give you all the services all the way up to the child's 22. But what happens after 22? When the parents no longer have resources, when the parents no longer have time? Do you want to know what happens to those kids? Those young adults, they either get to keep their job, if they could keep their job coach, or they do. It's like the game of Price is Right. You ever seen the cliffhanger guy?
I don't quite, I mean, no, I haven't. I mean, I sort of know what you're talking about, not specifically seen the show though.
So, like, there's a game on the Price is Right where there's there's a guy, and you got to get the right price before he falls off the cliff. And that's exactly what happens to people with disabilities, certain people, once their services stop. Especially the nonverbal ones. And then the parents are like, okay, well, what do we do with them? And then to get them to a proper transitioning program or an alternative school, there's like a 3-year waiting list.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Like, it's like, okay, I understand that not everybody can do regular class work, but when you go to high school for the extra 4 years, they should have, certain colleges do now, but all colleges should have programs to where young adults that go to school, that graduated high school on a special diploma, could go to school and get their degree on a payment plan program. And that's another thing. Not everybody could afford college. And then you're over here having to pay all these student loans and everything.
Absolutely.
Like the world is not accessible. Like, I took online courses and I got my trades, and that's how I did it after high school. You know, I took my passion that I had since I was 16 years old, and I've made a career out of it, and I use it to advocate and teach people about disabilities. Like, I also write a lot of nonfiction books, you know, and and with each character that I've written about, there's a piece of me and representation, because growing up, I didn't have that in a book. Although I was a bookworm, I didn't have that, especially in my teenage years. So for me to be able to give a young girl or a young guy that proper representation, that's great. Like, one of my romance books, Dear Justin, I got a lot of crap for it, because they're like, why would you make him obese and disabled? I'm like, because there's a kid out there that's just like Justin that needs to see that that's okay.
Yeah.
And that he likes the color pink, but that doesn't mean he's gay. And then meets a friend like Bianca that was a Afro-Latina in foster care with CP trying to find her way, and that's how they connect. These are the things that I write about in each character, because it happens. It's real. It's raw. It's true.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, as a successful blind person, I mean, I just really, I mean, I really appreciate you, you know, the fact that you're writing these books and speaking up and educating people. I mean, you're the type of person that I just love working with. I mean, this is exactly the type of people that are welcome on Aaron's Opinion. They're welcome in my community. They're welcome on my Discord server. You are the person that I'm trying to have more of in society. So it's just so up my alley and so appreciated and so well received by me. I mean, I just thank you doesn't quite do it justice, but you are so right. So what about blind people? Do you write about blind people? Do you write about blind people who have glaucoma and congenital heart defects?
It's funny because
well, it's funny because there might be a blind person who has glaucoma and a congenital heart defect that would really want to read that in a book.
Yes, and it's funny because I'm actually working, like, after I get done with this book that I'm working on, I'm actually gonna work on a book about a character that's blind and finds a dog as his friend.
what type of dog are you planning for that friend?
Miniature schnauzer, because I have a miniature schnauzer.
Oh, okay.
His name is Hobbs, and he's been service for me for like 10 years.
Okay, cool. Cool. So good. So good. I was hoping you were going to say a black Labrador retriever because I had a black Labrador retriever as a guide dog for 13 years. Yeah. So I'm a big supporter of guide dogs, from reputable organizations and things like that. Mm-hmm.
And then I also have a children's book where the guy is blind. His name is David, and I believe that's in the book called "We're Brave and We're Strong and We Won't Back Down." And then I have another children's book called Larry the Differently Abled Bear, where he's a bear and he's disabled in a way where he can't find his roar. So everybody makes fun of him for it until one day he just learns to accept it. And that was just recently turned into an audiobook.
Oh, so good. So
So
good. So, a lot of the other blind people who've come to my show, Tylia, have also written books about a variety of things. They've been telling me it's kind of hard for them to turn their books into audiobooks. So, how does that work? How do you find someone, and what process do you go through to turn these books into audiobooks? Yeah.
well, it's funny because I actually submitted it to a podcast called Daydreams Podcast, and what they do is they select books to become audiobooks, but it turns out one of my books was selected and it was Larry, and they went on and produced it and had a great narrator and did the sound effects. But if you want to go that way, if you want to go the traditional way, you would have to go on to whatever platform. Like I'm been using Amazon forever now, but you would have to go on to that platform. You would have to pick out your narrators and you would have to have them audition.
Right, right. Because typically people who write books don't read the book they write because that's not what you're best at. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
unless you're going through multiple edits. But I plan to release more of my books into audiobooks. It's just the funding.
Mm-hmm.
That too.
Mm-hmm.
The funding is something you have to keep in mind. And it's funny that it's not funny that you mention it, because you did say that you were going to talk about it. The publishing process, I could tell you this. When you're looking for a publisher, make sure you look for a publisher that appreciates your writing and appreciates you and represents you in the right voice, in the way you want to be represented as an author, because once you sign that contract, they also represent you.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So I decided to go the self-publishing route and be my own representative and be my own voice, because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like in the traditional world, in the traditional publishing world, there's not a lot of honest people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're running out of honest people in society, and that's also a huge problem.
So, and then when you're an author with a disability, they'll try to screw you over. I'm just gonna be honest. But from my past mistakes
Mm-hmm.
of almost working with the publishing company that I was doing articles for, and then telling me that I couldn't go write anywhere else or else they would sue me because they own the rights to me. And I almost got sued for that. From that experience, I learned it's better
Mm-hmm.
you represent yourself. And there's many different platforms that you can publish on. Amazon's the quickest and it's free.
Right.
Amazon's the more accessible one for me. There's also Barnes and Noble self-publishing. There's also Google Books. And
Mm-hmm.
what I like about self-publish is that I have control. I could see my royalties and I know that I'm my own voice. I hire my own editors on the side and they do what they do and I do what I do, and then I hire my illustrators, and I want to give a shout out to Manny, Chuck, Kim, Scott, Phoebe. You guys are all amazing, and I appreciate everything you guys do. So Pfizer, I want to give a shout out to you. They're like my illustrators are like the coolest people, and like when I give them an idea, particularly Manny, he just runs with it. Kim is a phenomenal artist. She did the cover for Unexpected Crossroads. Chuck, phenomenal artist too and cartoonist. He's actually helping me develop my animation cartoon called The Adventures of Stomping on CP. He's been great. Like, they're all great. Scott's been great too. Very new school artist out of Kentucky. Like, all my illustrators, I have nothing but nice things to say about them. And
Well,
my
that's excellent. That's about the best news I've heard. That's about the best news I've heard in a long time, to say that you have nothing, you only have good things to say. That's a really encouraging sign in this world. That is so good.
And my editors too. I have two editors currently, Katrina and Cheryl, and they have been extremely, extremely patient with me. Because sometimes, like, there's always a typo, or sometimes there's always something you need to edit, but they're always on point, and they're always so patient. And I also want to give a shout out to the first editor I ever had, Godfrey Thidier, out of Plantation, Florida. He edited my first book, James Ticking Time Bomb, and he was phenomenal to work with. When I was 16, my parents took the rope of that part, so like I didn't appreciate it. And then when I was 25 and I published my second book, and then I started to realize all the hard work that went into publishing my first one, and I'm like, oh, so this is what it means to be up and do all these things. And as you get older, when you're a writer, you grow. Like the other day, I still have my old drafts from like when I wanted to desperately publish a second book, and I'm so happy I waited till I was 25, because the ones that I attempted to publish after James Ticking Time Bomb, let's be honest, they were shitty. But over time, I had to build my craft. So there we are now. I'm sorry for the ramble.
I want my guests to ramble. That's what I'm betting for. I'm trying to get you to ramble. Well, that's all incredible. And when you write up your description for the episode, that I want you to include all of your social media links to all your books and all the links you want people to find out about. Definitely include them in your write-up for the episode, for the show notes, and then people can go and check these titles out and definitely give you support, because you're definitely worth supporting. Absolutely. But that's really deeply fascinating. I've traveled all over the world. And I've noticed that people in different parts of the world are treated differently based on, disability and things like that. So what information have you gathered? Because it would be interesting to know, and good for you to have the knowledge on top of it. How have you been received overseas if people from other countries have found out about the work you do? And what do you think about that?
People from overseas, like particularly, I have a huge fan base in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they all adore me, and because like I had to take a course for school where I had to learn about education and the special like education system in the UK, and they were like,
Mm-hmm.
great, you're so awesome, you're going overseas. But then there's sometimes people in like Africa or Ukraine or Romania that they just look at me like, you're out here in the US, I found you from such and such, and you're advocating for me, and you're using your voice to help. They're like, you couldn't come to the villages because this is taboo.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, like I don't know how to take that. Like,
yeah. Well, look, I mean, Aaron's opinion is listened to also by all continents tune in, and I have listeners all over the world. So know that the words that you're saying here are actually affecting other countries when you actually stop and think about it,
yeah.
But yeah, Eastern Europe is really, really tough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are the countries that I
Mm-hmm.
like try to help. Like, look at the war going on in Israel and Gaza right now. Like,
Hmm.
honestly, people were upset at me because I spoke out about the issue of it being, it's not about picking sides. Both people in both countries with disabilities are being affected. They don't have no medical care. They don't have a place to stay. Their houses are getting bombed every 5 minutes. Imagine having cerebral palsy and you're in your house and you're hearing bombs and you're wondering, how the hell am I going to get out my house if they just try to bomb it? Or they're cutting out your services to connect with your family or get medical care, or the buses. There's no buses in Gaza right now. There's no buses in Israel right now. They shut down. So those people with disabilities that are in wheelchairs, that are blind, that anything, they can't get out.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
it's bad enough those countries don't have the resources as it is. Like, every time a hospital gets bombed, I'm like, damn, like, there goes that. And people were getting upset at me, like, you support them burning people. And I'm like, no, I don't support that at all. What I support is disability rights, and this being a human rights issue for both sides of countries that are going through a war. Even the war in Ukraine, I try to send my resources out there because I saw a video that people with disabilities were being left,
Hmm.
and it was on the news, and it just broke my heart. And
And you do know that's not the first time that happened in Ukraine. They've done that several times throughout history,
yeah,
abandoning disabled people.
no, they've
Yeah.
they've done that several times. And even the disabled people in Russia, and people were arguing with me. They're like, why are you going against America's ally, especially with this war and Gaza going on? And I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm not. I'm speaking out for both countries because both
I
communities of
get
both
it.
countries are suffering. And
Absolutely.
they don't understand that. They just want to go to the political aspect.
Right. Right.
And I'm
But
like,
you take it from you understand it through the lens of, well, I don't necessarily want to say the word lens, but you understand it from the perspective of that everybody who has a disability suffers no matter what.
yeah.
In this type, sure, I mean, yeah, I mean, I completely get your argument. I completely get it. Yeah, no, you're correct.
And
Absolutely.
even the people with disabilities in Iran, when the war in Iraq and Iran was happening back in '03 and in '02 after 9/11, I
Hmm.
was young to understand what's happening, but now that I'm older and I could dig deep into disability rights issues, because it's not just a United States issue, it's a worldwide issue.
Hmm.
Like, how is it that the UK system is better than the US system? Or in
Right.
France, if you have a disability, you cannot go to school.
Yeah.
Like, I read
So
I
so
read
I'm actually a French speaker. Je parle français. And I understand French culture and French people very, very well now because I've studied the language for a very long time now.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a couple things that French society has some quirks and some curveballs. They actually, I think that in public places they are kinder to blind people. They're more respectful, but the opportunities are significantly less, which is ironic considering how educated of a country France actually is in the greater scheme of things, considering how high the literacy rate in France is, which is very high for a country.
Exactly.
Considering how many inventions came from France, many of them did.
Mhm.
Considering how many Nobel Prize winners came from France, many of them did. Considering how great Air France is as an airline, you would think that the country had done a little bit better with employing disabled people, but they just don't. And
Yeah,
quite
no.
frankly, but I don't think the US does it any better. We certainly are not better than France. I
Oh
don't think
yeah,
we do it any better. But you're
I
right. France has a big problem. Yeah. Hmm.
and so does Japan. Like, I connected with the mother
Yeah.
recently that
Hmm.
shared with me her story, how her son has
Hmm.
cerebral palsy, and every day she has to carry him up the stairs to school because they don't have rights over there.
Yeah, and also Japan has been criticized in the past about human rights, especially in their prison system. Supposedly, their prisons are very, very brutal in Japan.
And
Supposedly, they've almost violating human rights at times. Actually,
so
yes,
I want to touch more on a
yeah,
serious topic because my mother
sure.
is Puerto Rican. I'm Afro Latina, so my mother's Puerto Rican, and I take pride in being Puerto Rican. But every time I go to my country, every time I go to my Commonwealth, I see the lack of support for those with disabilities. Although Puerto Rico's a Commonwealth, we use US currency. People with disabilities don't get SSI. They don't get proper.
What?
Yeah, no, they don't get.
What? Well,
They they don't.
this puzzles me. Puerto Rico is part of the United States, so how can you
No,
not?
we're a Commonwealth. We're not officially a state. We're a
I
common.
know, I understand, but I thought Puerto Rico was technically speaking United States soil.
Yeah, but here's the thing: we're technically are, but we're not able to vote for the president. People with disabilities don't get rights because the ADA isn't technically passed there. And
What? That's weird.
yeah, and the education system for kids in Puerto Rico with disabilities is terrible. So you know what a lot of parents are doing, right? They're migrating to Kissimmee,
Hmm.
Florida because of this, or they're migrating to other states like Oregon and New York. And it's sad.
Hmm.
Like Puerto Rico, I only been there one time, and like not even the historical places are accessible. The buildings are torn down, but there's
Right.
not a lot of awareness for disability. If you have a disability in Puerto Rico, well, they're not gonna help. The government's not gonna help you.
Hmm.
I saw a story of a lady that she even wrote to Biden to get her daughter SSI rights, and they said due to the fact that you're a Commonwealth, we can't provide you with that.
That is very interesting. I specifically speaking, I did not know, I didn't have this knowledge. I didn't know about that, but that's very puzzling to me. That's very strange. Sure. Yeah. And that's weird. Definitely.
Yeah, that's weird, and that's why people with disabilities in Puerto Rico, we're fighting to make Puerto Rico the 51st part of the United States because we need it. And speaking of which, Puerto Rico is doing bad in itself. I mean, the government in Puerto Rico is just terrible. So every so often I get into those politics and I'm seeing what's happening to the island that my ancestors came from. My grandfather loved Puerto Rico, but I'm sad about the way they treat people with disabilities.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right to be concerned about it. That's very concerning.
So I will
Mhm.
be starting to speak out for Spanish organizations. I just have to sparken up on my Spanish a bit because I'm more Spanglish, but I have written books of characters that are from the island and that are Latino like me because again, I didn't see that representation in books growing up. So if I want to represent my commonwealth of an island, my beautiful Caribbean island, I'm going to represent it.
Well, good. Well, I think that's excellent. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I've never been to the French island of Martinique in the Caribbean, but I've heard that there's a lot of complaints about the same thing, that the conditions in these islands are very poor overall. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, hmm.
Especially after Hurricane Maria. Oh my God, Puerto Rico got destroyed. Like my family,
Hmm.
my family that lives there still, they're warriors, man. Because I live in Florida, but I couldn't imagine.
Hmm.
So it breaks my heart to see that there's a lot of human rights issues and disability rights issues wherever I go in life. Like you mentioned the thing about jobs and employment.
Hmm.
It's like we're required to have a job coach to get a job, but when you fill out the paperwork of what you're interested in, they don't want to push you to go above to be a CEO. They want to push you to be in a mediocre job.
Right, because then if you're CEO, then the coach loses their job.
Right. So to them, it's like paycheck to Uncle Sam, but to us, it's like we're human too. We deserve rights. That's like housing. They'll put you, if you request to live in a house, they'll put you in a poor area and with bugs and roaches and be like, well, this is what you asked for. Instead of putting you in a nice neighborhood, and then like they'll take away your benefits if you do something and they'll just keep you in the bubble. It's the saddest thing.
Yeah. How many people do you suspect are in this bubble, as you call it? How many people? Because I know in the blind community, the amount of blind people that are unemployed have lost hope. I that number is far greater than the number that I actually understand. So how many people do you know of that are in this situation? I'm sure it's a very severely high number.
A lot. And it's unfortunate because sometimes my phone will go off in the middle of the night and the person says to me, I just want to commit suicide because nobody cares about me, and they tell me
Oh
their
my
stories,
God.
and I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I have to deal with that like 5 times a day, and it's like I have my mental illness of my own. So my therapist was like, you need to cut off sometimes.
Yeah. Or you need to start your own podcast like I have, where you talk about these things and develop an audience, figure out who those people are, and they can be your audience who can listen to you and get a sense of peace from you, for sure.
And that's what my podcast Stomping on Cerebral Palsy is for. Like in the next year, I hope to expand it to where I could start bringing guests on. I mean, it's all up to Asheville FM and what they want to do with it, but that's the next step. And speaking of that, can we go into radio now?
Speaking of that, I think that's a great idea. We have just a couple more minutes left in the hour, but of course you can talk about radio and things like that. Go for it. Sure.
So radio, it's actually an interesting story because back when I was 14, I actually picked it up as a hobby with my friend Christopher Walsh, who has cerebral palsy and is nonverbal. And he started a radio station through a website called Blip, where we would mix music together. And I went by the name DJ T-Rex. Fast forward to the age of 21, I got the opportunity to do a radio show after an organization found Stomping on CP, and I did work with them. It failed miserably, and me and the station manager got into a dispute because she wanted me to play R&B music instead of country music. And I was like, no. She's like, you're black. You need to play this type of music.
What? No,
yeah.
That's
and
A, inappropriate, B, ridiculous, C, you can play whatever you want.
And I was like, no, this is my show. This is me. So I took my files and I went to Asheville FM, and I've been there ever since. And we've been doing the Stomping on CP radio show there for 3 years. And then I just got the opportunity, which the show's launching November the 6th on Johnny Rock and Roll Radio, 7 p.m. Eastern time. I'm actually launching a brand new radio show where I dive in deep into 90s country music and play that for you guys for a whole hour, and it is going to be fantastic. So I recommend you guys check it out. Yeah, but I have funny stories about radio. Like, I feel like with podcasting and radio, it's a totally different platform.
There's some tremendous difference, and then there's some tremendous similarity for sure. Yeah.
Like people have told me, like, you have the voice for radio. You should just stay with FM. And I could agree because FM has a unique touch. And let's just be honest, radio is very rare nowadays, and podcasting is too convenient. And anybody could do a podcast.
Yeah, but it takes special people like us to keep a podcast going.
Yeah,
anybody can start. You have to keep going.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, my advice to anybody that wants to get into broadcasting is just go for it. Your first broadcast is gonna suck. I pooped on myself my first live broadcast.
Wow.
Because my radio station manager, she's like, we're not going to commercial for the whole hour. And I caught the runs, and I had to sit and poop for a whole hour.
Oh, that is creepy. Okay, I didn't need to know that. It creeps me out.
Okay, I'm sorry, but you know
That's
what I mean.
that is unsettling and creepy and yuck. Ooh,
Oh
boy.
yeah, I'm sorry, Aaron, but
That's no, that's fine.
that,
It's just information that you could like. I would have like hid it or filtered that out. Or,
oh well,
like, hey, some people, some people are eating dinner. Like, they don't.
oh, I'm sorry. I forgot this was live. I'm so sorry.
Well, what if I mean? God, what if? I mean, what if someone? I'm just messing with you. So this Asheville FM though, I mean, well, maybe it sounds like, since you have such a good relationship with Asheville FM, maybe they would like to come to my podcast, because I'm always sort of searching for radio stations who are interested in downloading podcasts. If you kind of get my drift.
I'll connect you with KP tomorrow if that's where you're heading. He's a phenomenal guy. I'm actually
Let's get him on the show. I would love to connect with him. Absolutely, put me through. Sure.
Yeah, sure. I'll put you through. I mean, he founded Asheville FM, and Asheville FM was an internet radio station, and I think in 2019 it went to FM, but I'm not too sure on that. That's phenomenal. I also have to connect you with Johnny Rock too. He's another phenomenal.
Put me through. Get him on my show. I'm not stopping you. As I say, give out my socials, my number, all the numbers, give them out, get me connected. I'm not going to stop. Go for it. But thank you from the bottom of my heart to yours. You're just doing the right thing. Overall, you're doing a lot of hard work. You're working really hard. You're making a lot of progress. But Tylia, what stands out to me is what is overwhelmingly obvious is you're just a good person who's just doing the best you can each day. You just do your best each day. And that's how you've gotten here. You just keep doing the best you can do. And that's such a tremendous life lesson. I'm sure that you have questions for Aaron Richmond and Aaron's opinion. What do you really want to know, by the way? What do you really want to know about me to really, as I like to say, to really, to really make me sweat? See if I'm worth my salt. Yeah.
Oh, see, interviewers don't usually ask me this question, but
they should.
Who's your favorite author and why? And if you could be any book character, who would you be?
I mean, favorite author, hard to tell. I've had so many. Of course, growing up, I was a huge Harry Potter fan. Obviously. I
that. I was too.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. In Harry Potter, they don't really mention disability.
No. And
which is kind of interesting.
I actually wrote to J.K. Rowling about that, and I got an authentic letter back from Spastic.
I see.
Oh, and I've been tweeting her about it for years, or Xing it now, as they call it. Because you brought up an interesting point. Out of all the places, wouldn't you think that Hogwarts would have had a disabled character?
It's kind of interesting to talk about it. They sort of do when you think about like the giants that are mentioned in the book, So, or, the goblins, right, that work at Gringotts. That's not quite the same, but that's the closest it comes to mentioning someone with another ability or whose body is a little bit different. So they kind of do in an off-putting, mystical way like that. Yeah. But anyway, character in a book. Well, I think I would love to be a character in one of your books, to be a blind person with glaucoma and a congenital heart defect who has a podcast.
Oh, I'll put that. I'm working on a character right now, and I could tweak him around a bit.
Yeah, just tweak him to make sure that he has glaucoma and not RP, and make sure he has a congenital heart defect.
Okay. He's asking for it, because usually when I when I create characters, I like to create them based on people that I've met, and sometimes
Well, there you go. You've met me.
yeah. So now I could tweak Albert's character a bit.
Oh, I love the name Albert. That's a great name. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I will definitely do that just for you. And I just want to say you're awesome. What you're doing is awesome. And
Oh,
another question that I have for you
absolutely.
is like with your podcast equipment, like do you have to read things in Brickle for it?
Well, I don't really read anything in Braille anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because voiceover has taken over the universe. So,
Oh yeah, I love the accessibility feature on my on my
Mhm.
on my MacBook to where I could just have the
Mhm.
keyboard on the screen and then
Right.
it types.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So it's great.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting. So if someone wants to get in touch with Tylia Flores, how do they get in touch with you?
Oh, just go to www.tyliaflores.com, or you can follow me on Facebook at Stomping on Cerebral Palsy with Tylia.
Sounds good to me. You are forever welcome here on Aaron's Opinion. I want you to understand that, and I'm sure you're always going to be welcome here in my communities that I've built around my podcast that you'll learn about a little later. Um, at any rate, do you know how I end a beautiful episode of Aaron's Opinion?
You say encouraging words.
Well, yes, I do. That's true. So here's some encouraging words for you. Thank you so much for joining us. Help one person today. Help 1 million people tomorrow. If you've still survived on YouTube, thanks so much. So I'm Aaron Richmond. This is Aaron's Opinion.
I think we have a question.
Oh, sure. I missed it. I just didn't tap it the right way with the keys. Did you see it?
Yes, and this person asks, have you done any public speaking for employment?
So
Not
right.
yet, but I want to. That is something I want to tackle next. So you're on the right market. Thank you, Preston.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much to you, Tylia, for joining us. Thank you to the audience. RCL, thanks for joining us as always. And, you guys don't need to be so afraid. If you see these Zoom invites posted around the world, come on up and sit in the audience. We would love to have you. So we'll be back soon, everybody. Click the link in the description. And Tylia, you have a very good and a very productive evening. And we'll be in touch very soon over Messenger to discuss the next step and the next me getting in touch with these people and everything else. All right.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Bye.
You are so welcome. Help one person.